Hello, everyone. My name is Zanagee Artis. I'm 20 years old, a junior at Brown University, and I am a co-founder and the policy director with Zero Hour, and I'm super excited to be with you all today for Children's Environmental Health Day.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lana Weidgenant. I am 21 years old. I am a student at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm the outreach director of the National Children's Campaign. So really excited to be joining as well.
Awesome. So we are going to get into a presentation about our ongoing campaign right now, hashtag Vote for Our Future, talk a bit about the Green New Deal and why that's so important for children's health and environmental justice for kids. So let's get into it. So who we are, I'll start a bit about who Zero Hour is. We are a youth-led climate justice organization. We started in 2017. And since then, we've built up chapters around the country and around the world. And we are continuing to do climate justice education work like we are doing today with our Getting to the Roots presentations, as well as posting content on our social media accounts and doing individual outreach to people and young people especially to get them engaged and get them involved with the movement. And so this is actually a video from our first action, the Youth Climate March, with music by Ariel Martinez Cohen, the music director for Zero Hour. And I'll just give you a snapshot of what we did for the Youth Climate March in 2018.
The clock tick, tick, ticks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Eyes are open wide. And the clock tick, tick, tick. Stomach is feeling sick. Under the covers you lie. Then the phone, it starts to ring. Someone screaming. It's 2 minutes to midnight. Only 2 minutes to midnight. The sweat drip, drip, drips down your face to your lips, sitting straight up in your bed. The trembling spreads down to your fingertips. Is it just all in your head? Then the sirens start to wail as the system starts to fail. It's 2 minutes to midnight. Only 2 minutes to midnight.
Awesome. So that was our introduction to the movement. And that was what really launched Zero Hour. And so we've continued to organize since then. But what are our guiding principles? What is the platform of Zero Hour? So as a movement, we believe that those who are on the front lines of any movement should lead that movement. Young people are on the front lines, and we'll talk more about who else is on the front lines of climate change as we continue with this presentation. Youth leadership is transformational and visionary, and youth must lead because they have always shifted culture towards progressive and collective liberation. So that's why it's so important to have this movement be youth-led. And also, it's important for youth to engage other youth and get them involved in the movement. And then we affirm that climate change is real, Indigenous rights must be honored, animals are on the front lines, nature is the most powerful force, each generation must learn from each other, Black Lives Matter, and people with disabilities must be included and respected in all of our organizing work. And so what have we done since the March? So last summer, we hosted the Miami Youth Climate Summit. And that really got our chapter going in Miami. We had a lot of volunteer engagement there. We had great speakers, and the National Children's Campaign was with us there as well. And so I'll let Lana talk a bit about the Presidential Video Forum and what we did there.
Hi, everyone. So yes, it was really exciting to have National Children's Campaign participate as well and include young people in lobby training, learning about civic engagement, which we always are very passionate about, and also having videos from different presidential candidates. And that was really exciting.
Yeah. And then in September, we hosted a Youth Climate Lobby Week with the National Children's Campaign and 350.org, talking to members of the House and the Senate with plaintiffs from the Juliana versus United States case and Indigenous youth from Brazil, Ecuador, and Panama, along with Greta Thunberg, who had arrived by ship to the United States. And that was really exciting as well, getting a firsthand experience having young people interact with our elected officials is something that we hadn't thought would be the case where we are right now. But we have made major strides in the movement, and elected officials are starting to listen, which is really great to see. And then we also had the youth climate strikes in Washington, D.C. With Greta Thunberg, in 0 Hour, the National Children's Campaign, and Fridays for Future all worked on that. And that strike kicked off the Climate Lobby Week that I just mentioned. Here are more pictures of that strike. It was really successful. We had a lot of young people turn out. More pictures there. And then there's me on the left. This is the global climate strike happening in Providence, Rhode Island. And so this is just to show DC wasn't the only place that people were striking. So in Providence, we striked in cities all across the country and around the world. People were striking for our futures, for the water we drink, for the air we breathe, for a livable future. And this really goes to show how powerful the youth movement can be. Yep, and there's more pictures from the lobby week. And we actually also had, so Jamie Margolin, another of our co-founders, had the opportunity to speak before the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs for Europe, Eurasia, Energy, and the Environment, and the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. And they testified in Congress alongside Greta Thunberg and Vic Barrett. And then also in September, because September was a very busy time, we had the United Nations Youth Climate Summit. We had a bunch of people attend there and have world leaders listen to us about our experiences, what we're fighting for, and why we need to fight for children in particular. And then we also sent members of 0 Hour and National Children's Campaign to the pre-COP25 meetings in Costa Rica in October of 2019. And so now I'll hand it over to Lana to talk a bit more about the National Children's Campaign.
Thank you, Zanagee. So basically, the National Children's Campaign is a bipartisan national organization looking to make the 74 million children in the U.S. a national priority. And we are looking to serve as a catalyst to really inspire and empower the U.S. to make children a priority by promoting health, education, safety, economic, and environmental security through a variety of ways, such as through education, through grassroots, some of the campaigns and strikes that we conducted, and also working together with lots of different groups, from policy to our representatives to organizations and business as well. And some of our main areas that we focus on are included here, and that includes the environment. We also look at issues such as health for children, education, child welfare, child immigration, and a lot more. So here you can see a picture of some of how we got started with NCC and really being inspired by the need for action from the wildfires happening in California. And another big initiative that we've been having at the National Children's Campaign is climate action resolutions. And that has really been championed through Schools for Climate Action, that initiative, and having schools really drive this response to climate change through a variety of different ways, as you can see here. We also had an advocacy summit where we brought a bunch of children and youth from around the country to Capitol Hill to speak to their representatives, and that was a really amazing experience.
Yeah, and so something that came out of that was actually one of the students you see here worked directly with his representative to get support for the Green New Deal. So this next slide is about just that. So Representative Ben Ray Lujan endorsed the Green New Deal as a result of Harlan Quintana, who's one of the students who urged his representative to do more on climate action because of the fires that Lana mentioned, and because of the deep impacts that environmental justice and environmental health has on young people in particular. And
so you can get involved with passing a resolution through your school or through your community by visiting schoolsforclimateaction.org or by emailing empower@schoolsforclimateaction.org. And that's an initiative of the National Children's Campaign that we've been really excited about. And there's our social media as well if you want to stay updated.
Awesome. So next, there's me again at the Global Climate Strikes. And we want to emphasize this, that the strikes were really important. But what comes next? And so like we said, we've hosted lobby days, we've worked with elected officials, and now we're excited to be working with 0 Hour and the National Children's Campaign on a new project called the #Vote for Our Future campaign, which we launched in July and will be taking place all the way through the election in this November. And so what we're doing is we're focusing on 2 different states, Pennsylvania and Michigan, and we're working in Detroit and then Philadelphia and Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. And we may also be doing some work in Wisconsin, but the goal is to get young people to vote for our future because we know what's at stake. And that is what the campaign is all about. And it's also about making sure that historically disenfranchised groups, people who are most impacted by environmental injustice, are going to have the information that they need to be able to vote in November. And part of that is education around the Green New Deal, which we're about to get into with our Getting to the Roots of the Green New Deal presentation, because we want people to consider the Green New Deal as an issue when they're voting for candidates, because it is an intersectional way to address climate change that hasn't been talked about before. So now, 0 Hour and the National Children's Campaign present Getting to the Roots of the Green New Deal. And I will let Lana talk a bit about how the climate is changing.
So I think, as many of us know, the Earth's global temperature has been rising since pre-industrial levels, and that is also a huge issue in terms of increasing extreme weather, especially, and unstable climate patterns, which many communities are already experiencing, and all of us will ultimately experience if we continue on this path. So that's a little bit of what's going on right now. So what's at stake is that the Earth's global temperature is expected to rise actually 4 degrees Celsius by 2100 if these ambitious changes are not made immediately. And by ambitious, I don't mean outside of the scope of what we can do, but really taking large-scale action. And we know that irreversible climate processes will be put into place if we don't act quickly and on the scale needed. So there are many effects of climate change, and some of the big ones that we've been seeing include in terms of food and water access, and people not being able to reach these really vital resources. Also intensified natural disasters we've definitely been seeing so far, and natural in quotation marks, of course, now increasingly becoming climate disasters as we see stronger, more frequent hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts. This includes the wildfires that we've been seeing, for example, in California and in Brazil, and also in the Amazon rainforest, of course, and the hurricanes that we've been seeing intensify, for example, hitting communities along the coast. This will also result in mass migration as more people are forced to move due to these changing conditions.
Yeah. And I can talk a bit more about some other environmental issues, and there are a bunch of them that are mostly caused by corporations. But here are some more. So hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking, which I'll talk a bit more about on the next slide, but is essentially the process of injecting a liquid solution at a high pressure into subterranean rock to force fissures that in order to extract oil and gas. Offshore drilling, the process of drilling for oil in the ocean, which definitely poses threats to surrounding habitats in water. We know that the Deepwater Horizon spill in the Gulf of Mexico was an example of that. And then deforestation, of course. So the permanent removal of trees for repurposed land use. And we're specifically saying repurposed land use because it could be for many different reasons, right? It could be for urban development, but it could also be for industrial animal agriculture and making grazing lands for cattle. And there's also other options, right? They could be literally getting it for the wood. But deforestation is happening all around the world, and that's also driven by consumption and by corporations. And so I want to get into a bit more of what fracking looks like, because I think this is a process that not a lot of people fully understand why it's so dangerous, and why environmental justice groups are pushing for a ban on fracking. So on the left, you can see a rig and like a graph of the rig, and on the right is sort of an image of what it will actually look like. But essentially, you can see what's there above, but it drills very deep into the ground, drilling straight through reservoirs of groundwater. So if you have a well, the aquifer or the watershed that you might be on top of, it drills straight through that to get to the rock below. And then it makes a horizontal drill into the rock to extract the oil or gas. And what they're shooting into the ground to break apart the rock, we don't actually know what it is, but we know it's a chemical solution, which is why it's so dangerous that they're drilling through the groundwater. Because it's protected by patent laws, there is no way of knowing what chemical solution it is, and it's very dangerous for people to consume. And you may have seen before people lighting their faucet water on fire. That is a result of fracking. And then Lana, do you want to take us through the last few environmental issues?
Yeah, so we've included some more here. Obviously, this is not the full extent of environmental issues that are resulting, but some other important examples to include are industrial agriculture, and especially industrial animal agriculture or factory farming, which is the large-scale, intensive, usually monoculture or really intensified animal production that will involve a lot of chemical fertilizers and a lot of practices that produce a lot of waste and also a lot of harm to the soil and the land that then is not able to be used either for trees or for sustainable agricultural practices. Another issue is plastic pollution, which just means more plastic and plastic particles, for example, in the ocean, microplastics and other things like that, and chemicals which we are putting out into the world that don't naturally break down. So that means really scarily that they are going to be there for a long time, and that's an impact that we're not easily able to reverse.
Absolutely. And so like Lana said, this isn't a comprehensive list, but it is many of the issues that the environment is facing, and also people, of course, because we are a part of the environment. But now we're going to talk about the Green New Deal, which is our vision for the future, the way that we can address all of these different issues. And we'll get into why exactly that is right now. So about the Green New Deal. So the Green New Deal right now is a resolution. It is not a bill, but it's a resolution to address climate change through a just transition to renewable energy resources. We'll talk more a bit about what a just transition is in the rest of this presentation. It is a vision for the future, a future with environmental justice and without those harms that we've seen in the previous slides. This structural change to our entire economic and energy system. It's immediate and crucial climate action, and it addresses socioeconomic inequality. And so, Lana, do you want us to talk a bit about what the Green New Deal is not?
So some of the things that the Green New Deal is not include, the Green New Deal is not anti-hamburger. It's not trying to take away your burgers or your meat. There's actually no mention of cows at all in the Green New Deal. It's not a loss of jobs. On the contrary, it's actually working to create new green jobs. It's also not going to eradicate flying or take planes out of the air. That's not at all what the Green New Deal is doing. And it is not going to decline the economy. In fact, it's looking to build, again, those green jobs, those new green markets, a new regenerative economy.
Yeah. And so what is the Green New Deal, Lana?
The Green New Deal is focused on renewable and carbon neutral energy by 2030. It is a just transition for all workers. And again, we'll get more into that soon. It is complete economic transformation in the energy grid, and it requires a mass mobilization of our government and its people to combat the climate crisis, which is exactly what we need.
Definitely. So the name might sound familiar. That's because it is. It's inspired from the New Deal, which was enacted between 1933 and 1939 by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR. And the New Deal was created to respond to needs of relief, reform, and recovery from the Great Depression. And it included programs like the Social Security Administration, which is vital to many people today. And we bring this up in part because it's important to recognize the time that we're living in right now. We're experiencing a recession. Many people, millions of people, in fact, are out of jobs in the US because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And a Green New Deal could be a way forward to address the issues that we're seeing right now. But we also want to talk about what's different between the Green New Deal and the New Deal as it originally was. So what's different? The Green New Deal includes everyone, whereas the original New Deal was designed just for the benefit of white Americans. The Green New Deal also incorporates environmental degradation, not just economic development. It takes on the challenge of addressing the greatest threat to humanity, climate change, and it also prioritizes union labor. And now, Lana, I'd love for you to read what the Green New Deal actually says about this.
So what the Green New Deal actually says in terms of economic justice and a just transition is that it is the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions through a fair and just transition for all communities and workers, and to create millions of good, high-wage jobs and ensure prosperity and economic security for all people of the U.S.
And then do you want to read? Yeah.
Yeah, so this resolution guarantees, the Green New Deal resolution guarantees safe union jobs, a $15 per hour minimum wage, education and training for these new jobs, as well as universal healthcare for everyone, and public transit.
And so in action, what has happened with the Green New Deal? Well, it was introduced in Congress in February of 2019 by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York and Senator Edward J. Markey of Massachusetts. And Lana, do you want to talk about what is environmental justice?
So environmental justice talks about how the climate crisis and environmental issues are disproportionately impacting frontline and exploited communities, showing injustice in terms of the environment. And those communities include, for example, communities of color, indigenous peoples, migrant communities, low-income workers, women, deindustrialized and rural communities, elderly people, unhoused people, people with disabilities, and youth. So all of these different populations are in different circumstances on the front lines with the environmental and climate crisis. Some examples of environmental injustice include how fossil fuel plants will often be built in or near low-income communities and communities of color. Also, pipelines, as we've seen some examples recently, will often be built on or near indigenous lands. And there are populations, including elderly people, unhoused people, and people with disabilities that will often be the most at risk when we're talking about climate disasters, such as the hurricanes, flooding, wildfires that we were discussing before. These people might have the most difficulty relocating or might not have a home to go to. Youth are also another population who will be strongly impacted, as we'll be on this planet the longest time still left, and will experience and ultimately the greatest impacts to come of the climate crisis as this crisis gets worse and worse with inaction. Unhealthy air and drinking water are also disproportionately impacting the health and safety of children and people with disabilities.
Yeah. And so what does the Green New Deal say about all that? Well, it says exactly that. So it reads, quote, whereas climate change, pollution, and environmental destruction have exacerbated systemic racial, regional, social, environmental, and economic injustices by disproportionately affecting indigenous peoples, communities of color, migrant communities, deindustrialized communities, depopulated rural communities, the poor, low-income workers, women, the elderly, the unhoused, people with disabilities, and youth. So the Green New Deal is the first real government document that has been passed as a resolution that explicitly names that these people are on the front lines of the climate crisis and are people that we need to consider when thinking about a just transition to a sustainable energy economy. And yes, so environmental justice. So what is environmental justice? It's reforming systemic ecological prejudices while being intentional of how policies may impact marginalized communities. And so the Green New Deal, as we've said, guarantees clean air and water, healthcare, healthy food, and more to every American, the stoppage of all fossil fuel projects. I also will mention to every American and also people who do not hold citizenship in this country. The Green New Deal also considers those people as well. And it also guarantees a leveling of the economic playing field, which currently disadvantages certain populations by creating millions of $15 an hour safe union jobs. And it will also acknowledge all treaties with Indigenous peoples. It respects Indigenous sovereignty and mandates the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples for all decisions that affect Indigenous peoples and their traditional lands. Lana, do you want to read here?
Yeah, so the Green New Deal also says that it is important to promote justice and equity by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing historic oppression of Indigenous peoples, of communities of color, of migrant communities, of deindustrialized communities, of depopulated rural communities, the poor, low-income workers, women, the elderly, the unhoused, people with disabilities, and youth. So a lot of those same groups that we were just talking about before who are experiencing environmental injustice.
Yeah. And so the way forward. So I'll just read this quote by Naomi Klein, which says, "We face so many overlapping and intersecting crises that we can't afford to fix them one at a time. We need integrated solutions that radically bring down emissions while creating huge numbers of good, unionized jobs and delivering meaningful justice to those who have been most abused and excluded under the current extractive economy." The implementation of the Green New Deal would mean radical changes to all sectors of the United States and surpass conventional barriers to address discrepancies throughout the nation's current standings. And what does the Green New Deal say about that?
So the Green New Deal says that providing all people of the U.S., so all residents of the U.S., with high quality healthcare, affordable, safe, and adequate housing, economic security, and clean water, clean air, healthy and affordable food, and access to nature are extremely important.
Yeah. And I also just want to emphasize that the Green New Deal is more than a policy proposal. It is a vision for a better future. And a Green New Deal would be a cultural shift in the United States, a systematic end to exploitation of the environment and people on the front lines of the climate crisis. And it will mean a livable future for children today. I also want to talk a bit more about the just transition, because that's what a Green New Deal is. It is taking into account the people whose families who have been working in the coal industry for generations. It is saying we are going to guarantee these people who are working as employees in the fossil fuel industry safe union jobs and a transition to a more healthy living situation. And it also means transitioning the communities that have been negatively impacted by the fossil fuel industry, the poor communities and the communities of color that are being most impacted by fossil fuel infrastructure. Those children who are living by polluting plants and wastewater treatment plants and any system that is disproportionately impacting children's health. The Green New Deal is a transition away from those systems while also providing economic opportunity to those who have been most impacted by the fossil fuel industry. And so now that you know all that, Lana is going to take us through some action items for you to take.
So some action items you can take include becoming a Vote for Our Future ambassador, and you can do that by going to bit.ly/ToTheRoots in all caps. You can also sign up for updates at voteforourfuture.org. That's the website that has all the current information you need. You can also have a conversation with someone about the Green New Deal, and that person-to-person interaction is extremely important and impactful. You can also host your own community webinar using these slides, which you can find at voteforourfuture.org/slides.
Yeah, and the last thing you can do, if you have not already, you can register to vote. And so if you're watching this right now, you can scan that QR code to go to our website, voteforourfuture.org, or you can type in bit.ly/strike then vote, because it's so important that we carry this mobilization effort into the elections in November to continue this work and fight for a Green New Deal. And yeah, so while you do that, we want to thank you all so much for tuning in to this session. We are really excited about the prospects for Green New Deal, for this vision of a better future. We hope you'll vote for our future, vote for children's futures, vote for children's health, and join us in this movement.
Thank you all so much. We cannot emphasize enough the importance of this election in terms of children's issues, in terms of environmental issues, in terms of children's issues. So if you are able to and interested, please do register to vote and turn up this election with children's issues and environmental issues in mind. Thanks, everyone.